That intro though, y'all. Oh my gosh. That was like the highlight of the episodes for me. Not really the highlight, but I looked forward to the intro every time I started a new episode of Peacemaker, which is what I'm doing a review for right now. And I just got off, or just came down from work I was doing. So I'm trying to unwind mentally and get into the groove of doing a review. It's been a bit since I've recorded something, but I finished Peacemaker probably sometime last week, I think. And so I wanted to do a review for it because I enjoyed it quite a bit, and yet I couldn't at the time that I finished. So some of the things are a little bit fuzzy. I've got notes that I took while I was watching it. First off, I got out of the way that I enjoyed it. I did have a few little issues with it, but honestly, it wasn't anything that was enough to minimize my overall appreciation for it and enjoyment of it as a whole. It was a really fun experience and something I was not expecting to enjoy as much as I did. I looked forward to each new episode, and I made a habit of watching it almost every evening when I was done with work and I was settling down, and I would take over the TV from my husband. Not take it over. I mean, obviously he was done watching his stuff, so I put on my stuff, and so he was exposed to some of the lunacy that went on in the show, and he's like, "What the heck are you watching?" It was funny. But anyway, so something that I noticed right off the start was that the dialogue is pretty hilarious, and this gets set up. I mean, you notice this in one of the very early scenes when Peacemaker is leaving the hospital. As you know, he was very seriously wounded by, oh my gosh, what was it Deathshot? Idris Elba's character, can't remember his character's name. Anyway, he was seriously wounded by Idris Elba's character. And Peacemaker in the Suicide Squad, he was dorky and ridiculous, just not necessarily. He was an idiot, and he was just over the top and extreme, but he was funny at the same time. Then things took a turn, and he becomes like, oh gosh, this guy's a complete ass. I really don't. I mean, he was assholey, but he's really, really bad, and I don't like him. However, something that I noticed when I was watching the Suicide Squad and the altercation between him and Rick Flag happened. Obviously, you guys need to have watched the Suicide Squad before you see. I mean, you don't need to, but to fully appreciate the Suicide Squad, to fully appreciate Peacemaker, you really should watch the Suicide Squad. So during the scene where he killed Flag, I thought that John Cena actually did a really good job of capturing the complexity of this character, if you could really call him very complex, because on the surface he seems like a complete idiot. Absolutely unlikable, completely irredeemable type of person. And that's really not the case at all. But in that scene where he has stabbed Rick Flag in the heart, he has this look. I mean, he looks like it's not something that he's happy that he did. That is something that weighs on him. But yet he goes on, further to do things like try to kill Ratcatcher, and you're like, oh, dude, Anyway, so this show picks up. He's been in the hospital for 5 months recovering. He leaves the hospital. The dialogue humor picks up right at the beginning when he's having this argument with this janitor, Jamil the janitor, I think was his name. And it goes on and just all this crazy, it's like, what is this, And so that sets the tone for the character interactions that happen throughout this entire show. And then the next note I wrote is, what is up with that dance intro? It's like, what? So anyway, yeah, there's that. So the things that I picked up on as I was watching this, more things I picked up on. This is very much an R-rated show. Definitely not family friendly. The Suicide Squad wasn't family friendly either. This is even more. Well, this is even less family friendly because I will specifically mention that there is a sex scene that happens in the very first episode. And that was not present in the Suicide Squad. So if that's something that kind of, like maybe you don't, I don't know, just parental guide sort of thing going on there. But if your kid's watching the Suicide Squad already, oh well, okay? So there's that. But something else that I was getting the sense from early on, well, no, not early on. It starts to become clear to you that this guy, he's very complex. He seems superficially like only an idiot. Someone you just cannot appreciate or cannot like to any capacity at all, really. And yet, little by little, you start to see him as a sympathetic character as you see more of his backstory and the interaction or the relationship he has with his dad, which is very, very bad. I mean, like, his dad's played by Robert Patrick, and oh my gosh. Robert Patrick can really play a very effective bad guy. I mean, he looks, and Robert's a very nice guy, but when he plays bad guy, especially the character Peacemaker's father, he looks like a wicked, wicked SOB, like really, really bad. Like, you don't want to tangle with this dude. Anyway, he's very good in here. So you start to understand a little bit more of where he's coming from with his mentality and his ridiculousness. One thing that I did feel like in this show was that he felt more doofusy and ridiculous than he came across as in the Suicide Squad. Like, it was really amped up. And I don't know how much of that is because we're just around him more, because it's like, what, 8 episodes? 8 or 10 episodes. Each episode is like 40-some, 50 minutes. I don't know if it was just constant exposure to him or just he was written so much more just in your face ridiculous than he was in the Suicide Squad. But something that I wanted to find out comparisons between some of the characters in here and the way they are in the comic book. And I found out that some of the characters in the show are completely original. That girl right there, she's original. She's not in the comics. Also, gosh, Mern, the guy who plays Mern, I really liked his character, actually. There's just something about the way he played him. He's not in the comics. Peacemaker, of course, Vigilante, what's the girl's name? The blonde, Barbie-looking chick. She's in the comics. The beard guy is in the comics. And I had read that Peacemaker's character is not really exactly like how he is in the comic. That they have changed him quite a bit. He's not the complete silly, idiot, doofusy guy in the comics that he is in the show and the movie. I don't know how fans of the comic would feel about that. I have never read Peacemaker. I didn't even know about him until he showed up in Suicide Squad. I heard that James Gunn told John Cena not to read the comics because he wanted him to just make him like his own interpretation. I'm not necessarily unhappy with the way Peacemaker is presented in here because it just seems to work really well. But I can imagine that if he's a character you really like in the comics, you might not be happy with the way he has been changed. But anyway, there's that. What else? Oh yeah, the Tidy Whiteys make an appearance again, by the way. You see them quite a while in the very first episode. But also there's like really crazy, in the first episode there's a scene where he's singing with what he uses as a microphone that not a microphone. It was just, and I don't know if he was even aware of that. I mean, that's how like out of it he seems to be. Also, throughout this series, especially in the second episode, I think the second episode was when I started like real, honest to God, LOLs. And it's a part where he's like jumping down from this place. I'm not going to get too explicit because I don't want to tell you, I don't want to give to you too many spoilers if you haven't seen it, but he's like trying to jump down from this place, and every time he's jumping down, he's falling and hurting himself. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy, he was not this bumbling in the Suicide Squad. It's just like, what is this? But it was funny because the way they did it, that entire sequence that was going on with his character and then other characters that were in the area trying to assist him, and just the coordination between them and the communication, it was funny. I thought that was quite enjoyable. And it was around that time that I was thinking to myself, this show is actually really, really fun, and I'm enjoying it a lot. I mean, not that I wasn't before, but that part really cemented it for me, just because I was just laughing so hard. Something else that I did notice, and I'm going to touch a little bit on some of the things that stood out to me as stuff that I kind of nagged me a bit, was that in this show, for the most part, most of the male characters, especially the main male characters, they were portrayed as really idiotic, so dumb, and the women around them were the smart ones. You know, that typical formula that happens. And there are times where it really starts to wear thin, especially once it dawns on you that's what's happening. So that got under my skin a bit. But there were also moments where the women were kind of, you know, they were kind of the butt of the joke in some ways, but it really wasn't to the extent as what was going on with the men. So that was something that I could have done without, or maybe if it had been toned back a bit, I you know, maybe wouldn't have noticed it so much. But it was certainly, I mean, I noticed it because I notice a lot of stuff like that, this thing that has been building in different things, like different shows and movies in the entertainment industry, men being treated as doofuses and they can't do anything right and they're just idiots, and it's the women are smart, the women have to tell them what's up, the women are the ones that set them straight, they have all the, you know, that sort of thing. That was going on quite a bit in here. But because the characters themselves were so enjoyable, it didn't get to the point where it was such a turnoff to me that I didn't want to watch it anymore. It wasn't obnoxious enough to me to make me want to walk away from the show, in other words. Oh, yeah, something else. I'm trying to delete the things as I go through them so that I make sure I go through everything. John Cena is actually a really decent actor. I feel like he proved himself in this show. He carried it very well, and he was able to portray levels of nuance to his character that made him go from being just a complete idiot butthole to someone that you actually cared about and sympathized with. And I thought he carried that off very well. His face was very expressive. He's really good with a comedy, but also pretty good with the emotional, the dramatic scenes in here. So yeah, kudos to him for his performance in here. You know, despite his, in my opinion, misstep with his getting into the, you know, political commentary stuff with the things that happened, you know, with China and what he said and how he walked it back because everybody so, you know, kowtows to communist China. That was ridiculous of him, in my opinion. Despite all of that, I think he's actually a really decent actor. Surprisingly, that was something that I did not expect to walk away with from, or, you know, after watching this show. So yeah, I look forward to season 2, and I hope season 2 will be as good as season 1. But you know, sometimes it doesn't happen. Something else of note. Sometimes the dialogue, the banter between the characters, it was really funny. Pretty much most of the time. But it also, in contrast, it felt like it went on sometimes quite a bit longer than it needed to, and the running jokes were just carried on a little bit too long, and sometimes it was losing its effectiveness by then. So that was, you know, and also sometimes the bickering, the banter, the fighting that they were having at really ridiculous moments where they're in the middle of, like, let's say a fight, you know, a battle, life or death type of situation, and they're arguing about whether someone said something right or wrong, or whether they were correct about this or not. Yeah, it was just, it's like, this doesn't really feel appropriate. I mean, it was funny because the DC movies have been a little, you know, they've been on the darker side of things. Marvel more lighthearted and jokey and bantery and stuff like that. And this is definitely more in your face with the violence and the gore and stuff, you know, and things of that nature on the darker-ish side in some ways. And then they would have all this unexpected or sort of, can't think of the word I'm searching for, but like mismatched comedy that would be thrown in that sometimes didn't really work just because it was going on a bit too long. It was wearing thin. So there's that. Also, I did write down something about the montage in episode 4, his flashbacks. There was this thing that happens in episode 4 where he's thinking about his past, the things he's done, and the song that they used on top of that, and the scenes that they showed, and the way he was reacting to his memories. I thought that was quite dramatic and very effective. And around that time was when I was like, wow, I feel quite sorry for this guy. I mean, you start to anyway, because there's stuff that you see throughout the episodes. But when they showed that scene, I was like, wow, I feel bad for this guy. I really, really feel bad for him. And then, of course, you know, he turns around the next episode and he's ridiculous again. But still, you know, it's just... Anyway, so there's that. Eagly, his friend, his best friend, Eagly the Eagle, is hardcore for sure. That was something that I think the character Vigilante said when they're, like, I don't know, running from some people after them, and Eagly gets into the battle, and Eagly is... like, you don't want to mess with that. You don't mess with that eagle. He's something else. Vigilante is a character that was pretty funny too, and absolutely crazy. And I'm not sure that that's how he is presented in the, well, not counting the absolutely crazy part. I don't know that Vigilante is presented the same way in the comics. He's kind of comedic as well. Very clueless. Just not in tune to, that's Vigilante right there. He's very disturbing. He's disturbing, but he's hilarious. Anyway, some of this stuff has not... There was a character in there, the guy who played the Swede in Hell on Wheels, and I don't know the actor's name. There's this scene where he's smiling, and I just wrote, he looks like Joker, because he's got this long, pointy face and this really wicked smile. That was just something that I noticed. Oh, something else interesting. There's a scene where his character sits down at a piano and plays a piano. And so, of course, as soon as that happened, I wanted to look it up and see, is that really him playing the piano? And yes, it is him. It's kind of funny because he reminds me a little bit of my brother in that respect, that he's this big buff bodybuilder dude. And he's got this artistic side. He's a self-taught musician. And he's playing this piano, this music, you know, lovely music. And it just, that contrast between what he looks like and these things that he's interested in and that he can do. Just, I found that quite interesting and wanted to share that with you guys in case you didn't know. Hardcore Raccoons. I don't remember which episode that was, but there's some hardcore raccoons. Okay. Oh yes. Something that I wanted to point out to you guys, if you haven't started watching it yet, at the very, very end of each episode, there's a tiny little clip-it. So stay around for that. Watch that because some of them are pretty funny. There's one that happens at the end of episode 7 where there was a guy in the background, like some side character or extra background character playing a cop, who he's very obviously amused. He's quite tickled at what's going on in the scene, and it's not in character. That's definitely a blooper. And I don't know if that particular scene was just like an ad-lib bloopery thing that they just did just for fun, but the guy, that was a lot of fun to watch how tickled he was. He's the dude, when you're looking at the screen, he's going to be the one off to the right, like standing in the corner. You'll know it when you see it. I already talked about silly convos in the middle of serious situations. The beard joke that goes on and on with Economos, I think that's his character's name. So, a couple of other things that I noticed as I'm watching it, and it's kind of a little hard to process in a way that I can explain it to you as to how it's just intuitively feeling to me. There's definitely some wokeness that's woven into this show. It's not to the point that it made me dislike the show or made me not want to watch it, but I definitely noticed it when it happened. And also just because of, like, in some of the discussions, there would be narratives that were thrown out there and bantered about, thrown about basically, and a lot of sort of talking points type of things that you could tell were happening on both sides of the divide here in the US, let's say. And I felt like the quippiness of it, in a sense, it sort of poked fun or poked holes in or at these narratives that people on both sides tend to hold. But at the same time, it was making light of things or sort of presenting these particular narratives in a way that sort of made it seem like it's very black and white and just, there's no nuance to it, when there's nuance to a lot of these things that they were talking about. And so I was like, that kind of like, so when these things were happening, I'm thinking, yeah, but it's not quite, yeah, but there's this, and yeah, but I don't know if that was the intended purpose, is to make you think at all or think of like sort of rebuttal points to the things that the different characters were saying, or if they were just doing that to kind of make fun of that sort of mindset that some people can have. But I don't really feel like that's the case. I kind of feel like it was sort of like, trying to make these points, these little woke points that do get kind of ingrained into a lot of things. You know it when you see it, but a lot of times it's also wrapped up into some funny dialogue that sort of takes the edge off a little bit, and in a sense, like I said, kind of makes fun or pokes fun at each other. I think you'll know what I mean when you watch it. I don't want to get too specific. And there was another thing, and it kind of had this, there were times when it would sort of have this, what I felt was like a kind of a preachy sort of tone or narrative against people who speak out against government intrusion, which happens to be a lot of people, and for a good reason. Some people definitely take it to an extreme, because anything can be taken to an extreme. But a lot of people have a healthy distrust of governmental authority. But there were times during the course of the episodes where they were also treated with this black and white type of approach to their viewpoints, where in reality that's not the case. There is a lot of nuance and complexity and valid points made by people who hold the types of views that were kind of being made fun of in here. Stuff like that. That kind of falls under the wokeness stuff I was talking about earlier. But it's, like I said, any of those things that stood out to me as stuff that kind of, yeah, wish they hadn't done that. It was not to the point that it diminished the show to a large degree for me at all. I mean, I really, really had fun with this show, and I think most people will enjoy it. A lot of people, probably most of you guys have already seen it, but I feel like it's gotten an overwhelmingly positive reception, kind of surprisingly, to a lot of people. I really don't think people expected to enjoy this as much as they did, or that it was going to be as enjoyable as it has been. It's described as a workplace comedy, and that is in a lot of ways what it is, because it's about these group of people. They're working together. They have their different personalities and the conflicts that go along with that. And yet, through the course of working together and the growing pains they have with each other and the fights and all this and that, they all come to a level of appreciation for one another, respecting each other, caring for each other. And you see them being able to work through these differences that they have. And I thought that was handled very well. I especially like the relationship between Peacemaker and Abadayo, or oh my gosh, I don't know if that's the right way to say. I can't remember. Those two, perfect timing. The relationship between them was really interesting to watch as it unfolded. They were both extreme opposites of each other, and yet they came to the point where you could see little by little as the show went on that they formed this connection, close friendship, and respect for each other. And I thought that was handled really well. And yeah, so it was fun. It was a good show, and please don't bungle up season 2. I guess we'll see. So yeah, that's all. I think I've gone through all my notes. Can't think of anything else, so I'm going to wrap this up so I can edit it, hopefully get it up by tomorrow, because it's not tomorrow yet. This is Thursday the 24th as I'm filming this. Oh yeah, no, I know I was gonna say, how many of you guys have watched this, and did you enjoy it, or were you ultimately unsatisfied, especially if you read the comics? Or did you just kind of feel meh about the whole thing? Curious to find out what you guys think. All right, yeah, definitely it for now. I'm going to wrap it up. Talk to you guys later.